let's dive into the reason why we're here and talk about the latest episodes of Agatha All Along on Disney Plus. Today, we're going to talk about both episodes 4 and 5, which recently premiered on Disney Plus. Last week's episode 4, was entitled If I Can't Reach You, Let My Song Teach You. And episode 5 is entitled Darkest Hour, Wake Thy Power. So we're going to talk about them really together as sort of a single sort of experience, since we didn't get to it earlier this week, but now we have both of these. But before we dive into spoilers and get into all the details of the major events that went down, we'll just start off with our general thoughts, big picture thoughts about the most recent episodes of Agatha All Along. So I'll pass it to you, man. What do you think about sort of where we are in the midpoint of this season with Agatha All Along?
Yeah, usually, some of the other Disney Plus shows by this midway point, either we're like, okay, give me another episode and we'll see what it feels like to determine how this show was going. Or, we might be feeling pretty decent, by this time. And right now, to be honest, I'm feeling pretty decent by this midway point. I'm more, I guess, still in it more than not necessarily more than I thought it would be, but I am still, I guess, a little surprised about how more I'm still into this thing, man. Agatha is doing what it needs to do for me and what I expected it to be. I think by episode 2, they kind of showed us what this series would be, and they're kind of continuing on that path and always giving me some random surprises, I think, along the way that I'm not expecting almost every episode. And I think these past 2 episodes have been super solid. Again, the surprises continue to get me. I'm still enjoying Catherine Hahn and what she's bringing to the table. I think she's kind of killing it. Every now and then there's like an acting beat. Now I'm like, that felt weird, or somebody said something. I'm like, was that the dialogue we were supposed to say? Or every now and then there'll be something a little shaky like that. But I think these episodes overall are again pretty solid, and I'm still enjoying myself, man. And after this week's episode, now I'm really like, oh yeah, we halfway for real, and I'm excited to see what's going to come out of this whole thing. But I say a pretty good halfway point, man, and I think of course they still got to bring it home. A lot of 4 episodes left after this, but I like where we are.
Yeah, I think now with Agatha All Along, things have been mostly solid. This is a show that I don't hate watching it. It's not great per se, but it certainly, I think, is giving me a level of enjoyment for the most part on a week to week basis, where I'm like, yeah, this is pretty pleasant. And I think that episode 4 certainly continued that energy. Episode 5, I liked what happened within it, but I also did think about the restraints and sort of the limitations that we've had with these Disney Plus Marvel series. Like episode 5 is the shortest so far. And when I saw the runtime, I'm like, okay, I'm worried because that's 32 minutes, but that's 32 minutes with the opening credits, the flashback, the end credits. So it's really like, what, 27 minutes, 28 minutes, maybe.
Yeah.
And I do think that it felt the most like other Marvel Disney Plus shows where we are rushing very, very quickly, and we need some time to just like let moments breathe, and that doesn't happen in episode 5. But I still liked what happened within it. I just feel again, like a lot of these shows, the structure of them just is, it's just baffling to me sometimes. Like we don't have to make things this way. Like this really could have been, I think, one long episode. I'm actually glad that we're talking about them together, because I don't know if episodes 4 and 5 needed to be 2 separate things. Like I get that certain narrative events happen to distinguish them from each other, but at the same time, it's like, well, do you really have to separate this, or could this just been 63 minutes of one longer story, because they're very, very much connected in terms of what happens, the payoffs, all of that stuff. But overall, it's still solid. It's still pretty good at this point. I'm not super critical of a lot that's happening here, and ultimately I think that with just the way that things are shaping up and shaping out, like we'll be pretty decent, and we'll probably be pretty okay before the end of the show. But with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive into all of the nitty-gritty details of what happened with the latest episodes of Agatha All Along. So if you've not watched them, definitely go watch those and finish out the rest of our conversation and come back and do that. With episode 4, as we saw after the events of episode 3, Sharon does die, and it looks like that they are sticking and committing with that death. But basically, they need a replacement witch, or a replacement green witch, and we see the reappearance of Rio, played by Aubrey Plaza, come back. And she basically, once again, I think injects this show with a ton of energy that I definitely I missed in the previous couple of episodes. You know, we saw her in episode
Hmm.
one, but we didn't really see her. But she comes back and ultimately, I think, kind of confirm some suspicions of what we thought, but they really shine a light on the fact that her and Agatha not only had like obviously history with each other, but it's clear that there was romantic history between these two. Like that is
Yep.
definitely the thing now. We see that there's a lot of tension, a lot of sexual tension, you know, between these two, but
Hmm.
they certainly allude to the fact that like, hey, something happened here, but these two definitely used to be very much romantically in tune with one another. But
Hmm.
for whatever reason, certain things happen to lead them, I guess, on separate paths. And there's several moments like Agatha is trying to kiss Rio. Like we get all of that stuff. So they don't shy away from it in that respect. So I just want to start off there and ask you, you know, what did you think about, I guess, that mini revelation? Again, we suspected that there was something there, but now
Hmm.
they just full on confirm it. And ultimately, what did you think about the chemistry between Catherine Hahn and Aubrey Plaza in this episode?
Yeah, I mean, good job for them for I think confirming it, and part of me feels like even our suspicions that we had in previous episodes might have been accurate, where we were like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be a thing. Like, are they actually going to make this a thing? And they do actually make it a thing, and I think I almost feel like they did that on purpose. Like they were like, oh, let's make them feel like, oh, here comes Disney again, about to do something gay but not go all the way, and then they end up doing it. And they're like, yeah, here's the actual thing. So I'm glad they went that direction. I think the chemistry is fine between the two, and it's so interesting though. It's kind of a fun dynamic because even though you can tell they have history, there's always these little moments where they're either trying to kill each other or they're arguing at each other, and then they're soft with each other. The push and pull are so drastic between the two. It's almost like nowhere in the middle. Either we're trying to kill each other, or you're like being comforting to me, or it's such an interesting dynamic. So I think they're doing a good job on that part, and I think like you said, I think Aubrey Plaza, anytime she's here, she's adding a needed energy into the show.
You know what's interesting too is that I think you know, in hindsight now, seeing where these two characters are, to have Aubrey Plaza and Catherine Hahn on screen together and their relationship just be strictly platonic would almost kind of be a waste. It's like, well,
Yeah,
you probably should make them like romantically involved with one another. That seems like
kind
the
of
more
got to.
opportune moment. And so I'm
Hmm.
glad that they just like went there to start to showcase like what that means for them. But these two, they just work so well on screen together, and even like Aubrey Plaza returning like those opening moments when she emerges, and even her interactions with the other witches from the coven. You know, there's that moment where Jen is like, you know, I don't know whether to like hate her or ask her for her number. You know, they all have like this attraction to her. They all feel this
Hmm.
this gravity, you know, towards her energy because she just comes in and really kind of steals the show. And I'm just glad that they were able to seamlessly sort of weave that in because we said this last week. Deborah Jo Rupp just added so much like comedic levity to the
Hmm.
show and added a great dynamic to sort of break up the more serious moments. And almost, you know, without any hesitation, Aubrey Plaza just comes in and fills that role in pretty easily. And so I think her presence this whole episode was very welcomed, and I enjoyed it a lot. There is like one big trial that happens in this episode that seems to kind of be the formula of the series, where they ultimately reach another house, and the house has this 1970s, like this late 60s, early 70s aesthetic that
Hmm.
basically kind of really gets underneath the skin of Alice. We see that it's very much kind of tied in with her history, and we know that there's a lot of stuff going on there with her and her mother and all of those things. Like everybody in the show has like mommy issues, and so they sort of lean in on what is troubling Alice, but they go to this you know, this new trial, this 70s aesthetic sort of style house, and it almost kind of resembles like Bad Times at the El Royale, which came out in
Mm.
like
Hmm.
2017, I think, the Chris Hemsworth movie. But
Yeah.
it felt spooky, you know, because, you know, it's definitely like, I think, you know, sort of a clear evocation of that. But it also has like this recording studio set up inside as well, which is a kind of cool touch. But ultimately, like, there's a lot going on here. There's a ritual, and a demon appears, like that appears on like the top of a bookshelf. It's some crazy stuff going down. You
Hmm.
know, once this all gets underway, and ultimately Teen gets injured because of it, and it looks like that he might also lose his life in the midst of everything that's happening here as well. But again, as I said, this has been the consistent sort of trope throughout the series. Now that we're at this new location, the 70s sort of style house, this recording studio, and we just get to see like all the crazy stuff that happens here. What did you think about like that set piece, the setup of it, how it ultimately intertwines with the story of not only, the entire coven, but of course of Alice as well?
Yeah, I also think the costume department is having a really good time having it, just being on this show in general. Like every time they walk into somewhere new, they got to figure out this whole slew of costumes to figure out what these women are going to wear. And I think it's been pretty good what they've conjured up so far. And shoot, the production team is too trying to figure out these different set pieces, what they're going to look like you said, like Bad Times of the El Royale feel. Everything they have on is like Fleetwood Mac fill-in, or like, you know what I mean, or like Daisy Jones in the Six. I don't know. It's like just a really cool feeling and callback to these periods in time. Very very groovy 70s era house. That's been pretty cool. But I really like what they, I guess the things that they come up with. I guess every time there's always something that seems to be specific to the era in which where they are, right? Like we get the record player. It's like, oh shoot, yeah, of course there's a record player there, but it's not there for no reason. They actually kind of use it as a very small plot device, and I'm like, yeah, do that thing. I like that they're like use the era for what it is, and they did that in the house, man. So yeah, I'm really liking everything they're doing. I think with the production design and the costumes and how it all seems fit, and the performances are also kind of doing the same thing. They're always commenting on something about what they have on to some degree, and here again, we're 70s, we're groovy, we're gonna have to sing, you know what I mean? So they end up singing. I just like how everything is kind of connected in a way.
I think it's interesting too. Like Jack Schaefer, who was the showrunner of WandaVision, is also behind this show as well. Like she's managed to work in a very similar structural sort of
Hmm.
episodic method of like revisiting different time periods. Like she's doing it in
Yeah.
two different, distinctly different ways between those two shows. Like obviously, WandaVision focused on the sitcom idea and aspect of it all, but now with Agatha all along, we're actually physically manifesting these different houses that all tie into the lineage and the history of these respective witches. But it's also going to present like entirely new challenges, and we're seeing that those
Hmm.
challenges are pretty formidable, because when that demon comes out, it's like, oh, that's a pretty scary moment, that's pretty frightening. They're kind of pushing the
Yeah.
bounds there. Look like a conjuring demon almost, and so that was a
Yeah.
cool touch. And then
Remind me of the
sh-
viewing.
yeah, exactly. And shit
Kind
just
of.
kind of
Yeah.
hits the fan from there. And
Hmm.
ultimately, Teen, again, as I said, he's severely wounded. And they tend to the wound, but there's a big moment at the end of the episode where Agatha and Rio are once again talking. As I said earlier, Agatha's trying to have this intimate moment with her, and Rio's just like, wait a second, you know that Teen is really not your son, right? Like she implies like, hey, have you like kidnapped this boy? Like, are you holding him against his
Hmm.
will? And they leave it on sort of that cliffhanger for the end of episode 4. And as we get into episode 5, we start to see a lot of that does come to pass, and we ultimately get some answers on that. But episode 5 really, I think, does a good job at reestablishing once again, and they planted the seeds again in episode 4. Like Agatha is just like not trustful. She cannot be trusted.
Hmm.
They talked about it in episode 4 where it looks like Rio's trying to trap her with the audio recording, like, oh yeah, you're
Yeah.
just ultimately going to backstab him at the end of the day. And then they start off episode 5 with the flashback episode of basically Agatha destroying the coven, the
The
coven that she was
Coven.
a part
Hmm.
of. I think just reminding us like, oh yeah, remember, like this woman is definitely a villain. Again, she can't be trusted. And we ultimately know that coven is very much tied to her own family bonds. It's tied to her
Hmm.
mother and the relationship that she had with her and all these different things. And so we constantly cannot trust this person, obviously, that we're following here. But how did you feel about, just again, I think that idea just being consistently harped on, that this is still at the end of the day a supervillain to a certain
Yeah.
extent, and on top of that, her history is so intrinsically tied in with Wanda. As we find out, like
Hmm.
Teen is ultimately, they are alluding to the fact, is one of the sons of Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
They're doing a lot there to remind us of just all the things that she's done, all the people that she sort of betrayed, but then also like how this really has just bonded her with Wanda throughout throughout the course of these past few years, and what happened with WandaVision, and of course like everything that's happening within this show.
To be honest, it's kind of in some ways different, I think, for a character to kind of be like this. A lot of times we get on the superhero side, we get people who are good, who are slowly trying to gravitate, or the show puts things in it, then they're trying to gravitate towards bad. Versus Agatha, we're like, this person is terrible, she's really bad, and every now and then you're like, oh, she felt for somebody, and you see her maybe gravitate towards good. And it's funny because almost any superhero thing you watch, they usually gravitate at the end towards the good, right? But here it feels like almost the opposite is happening. Like, yeah, she's bad. She may gravitate towards good sometimes, or caring about something, or doing this thing. And it's like, no, she's going to be gravitating towards the bad at the end of the day. So it's been a really interesting structure that I think we don't get all too often. Seeing, like you said, they have to constantly remind us, like, y'all know she killed these people, right? Y'all know this coven got wiped out because of her, right? And she'll like double down on something and be like, well, mercy's overrated. You know what I'm saying? I should have killed them all. Should have killed the kids. And you're like, whoa, you're crazy. Like, why'd you just say that thing? So I'm just enjoying her as a character because it's something, again, it's something refreshing. We've never really gotten somebody who keeps doubling down like this, like especially not in like a Disney Plus kind of situation. It's like, no, you are not a great person. So yeah, I think they're doing a good job.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of like those early stages of Loki, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
I just want so much better for you, but he just never
Yep.
chooses the better route. He's just always choosing like, damn, like he made another decision again that's going to betray somebody, that's going to backstab somebody. It's partially like why we do sort of adore the character, because he is
Mm-hmm.
so flawed, and we follow those flaws ultimately until then we see way down the line sort of the redemption that happens within his own series. And I envision that even with this show, like I don't know what the future plans are for Agatha All Along is as a series, or Catherine Hahn, but I don't know. I envision by the end of this, like we still won't love her. I think it might be a
Mm-hmm.
mistake to
Yeah,
undo just like
exactly.
sort of the dastardly acts. Like keep her this way, because I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what ultimately has to happen in terms of, okay, now we can gravitate towards her. Now we're seeing that she's learning to be better. That takes a lot of time, and I think that
Yeah.
requires like multiple projects to really try to communicate that idea. So I hope that they just kind of stick with where we are right now, and not
Mm-hmm.
make her all of a sudden just wake up and realize like, oh yeah, I've been doing like really bad things this whole time, and now I'm gonna lead a life of good. It's not that easy, and I think that
I
we should
agree.
definitely like lean into that. We also got a lot of witchy, like super witchy stuff in this episode in
Hella witch
particular.
stuff.
We got broomsticks, we got Ouija
Mm-hmm.
boards, we got ghosts, we
Yep.
got witch powers, like absorption
Mm-hmm.
powers, like all sorts of stuff. How did you feel about that? Because again, as I said, it was moving really really fast. The pace of it
Yeah.
was super quick, but they stuffed a lot in here. We've seen witchy stuff before in the show, obviously, but I think they just kind of went full on with like what we would establish and know to be true about like witch lore, the things that we would associate with those types of characters. They really just added a lot of that stuff into this particular episode.
Yeah, I like how they were there's always commentary on the witchy thing that's like, I guess, trying to make you rethink on how you feel about certain things. Like when they talk about the brooms, they're like, we hate brooms because they're a bad symbol of domestic, being domesticated women and all these. I was like, yeah, that would make actually a lot of sense why witches wouldn't actually like brooms. But here they had to use them, and I guess I never. And I'm sure this lore is a thing, but the fact that they have to fly together isn't a thing that we always talk about in witch lore either. They're like, no, we have to fly together. That's the only way it can work. Yeah, and we don't always, I think, kind of get that idea either. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So I like them. I think the witches themselves having commentary on witchy things that exist in popular culture. I think that was a good idea to throw in there. Again, very small, but I'm glad they did it. But yeah, this is when they're on the brooms in the beginning, it felt very hocus pocusy, right? Like it was almost impossible not to feel hocus pocusy. Like they're flying, the moon's behind them, it's all beautiful. I'm like, what is this? And of course, it gets dark really quickly, but I thought it was cool the way they went about it. Again, pulling the tree branches out of the whatever it is, the grassy walls. I don't know what to call that piece of foliage or whatever it was, but I think those ideas were cool. And then, like you said, Ouija boards and ghosts and all. I'm like, I don't know how this all happened in 28 minutes, 27 minutes, 26 minutes, however long it was, but it was moving, let me tell you. But I really do wish we could have taking time to sit on some of that stuff. During the Ouija board part, only thing I didn't like was the closed captions. I have the captions on all the time, and it
Mm,
tells you what they're spelling out before
yeah,
they even spell it. I was like, y'all could have did one letter at a time on these captions. Why y'all do that? Like, give me time. Let me figure out what everybody else what
right.
they're going to say. Because now the next 5 seconds are wasted. I don't need to. I don't need to go through it anymore. I thought that was weird. But yeah, man. I like you said. I like everything they were putting in here. I thought the ghost stuff they did very well. I thought the Ouija board stuff they were doing pretty well. The possession stuff, whoa, what didn't expect it. I thought they did pretty well. It just happened really fast. But yeah, I like that it was included here.
Yeah, that possession that was a pretty
That
intense
was
scene.
pretty good.
I was
Yeah,
like,
I was like,
wow.
whoa.
Yeah, they kind of nailed that. I was like, that's really good stuff. I guess to go back to the idea of villainy and Agatha. So, one of the key revelations in this episode is the fact that Agatha ultimately killed not only her mother, but the rest of that coven, and the rest of that coven are the mothers of the Salem Seven that we're now following. So this
Mm-hmm.
is all very much rooted and tied in together. And when you see that scene in isolation in WandaVision, it meant something. It showcased, like, yeah, Agatha has a long history. She's not to be fucked with because she was able to take out an entire coven for herself. But now they've been able to sort of repurpose it and give it new meaning in this episode and show, like, oh, that is also true. But on top of that, this is a very much shared history amongst all of these women,
Mm-hmm.
and this idea of motherhood and the generational effects of it really, I think, come into focus in this episode. Because again, you see that scene in isolation and you see that Agatha's mother is a ghost, who's haunting her. You think, like, wow, what a terrible thing, she killed her mother. But there's that one pivotal moment in the episode where Rio's like, well, her mother did try to, like, sacrifice her, and so, like, I kind of
Let's talk
understand, like,
about
why
it.
she did what she did, right? So we're
Yeah.
seeing them play with that idea, like, you don't necessarily know all sides of the story, and everybody has their own
Mm-hmm.
perception and interpretation of what went down and the events that happened. And so, how do you feel about just that theme being worked in here? Just the, I don't want to just say generational trauma and just, like, infuse that idea within it, but again, there are lasting effects here, and we are seeing that, at least I think what they're trying to convey to us, some of Agatha's wickedness is probably rooted in the
Mm-hmm.
relationship with her mother at the end of the day. Like, some of that probably comes from that, and they did not have the greatest relationship, clearly, and that's shaped her into who she's become. But not only her, but all of the rest of the characters that we're following,
Yeah.
there are these pretty contentious relationships. Like, nothing seems all that healthy between the daughters and their mothers in this show. And so I did think that was like a big focal point, even though they moved through it quickly. That became sort
Mm-hmm.
of, I think, the overarching thesis of, like, what they're trying to explore with the show here.
No, I really like that because this generational thing going on between mothers and their daughters and everything is the big question mark on the entire show, really. Like, that's almost the thing we're trying to figure out. And once we get an answer, it's like, oh, that's what's happening. For instance, in episode 4, where we figure out Alice has this legit generational curse on her. And her mom was singing the song as a whatever star, as a vocalist, to as a protection spell the entire time. That's cool. I was like, whoa, now we have reasoning and method to the madness. I like that as a driving force in the show. And I think Agatha is going pretty much through the same thing. They keep asking us, they keep, I think, raising these questions for Agatha and why she does what she does. And that's what we're trying to figure out. Nicholas Scratch, her son, how did he get, like, why did she, clearly she cared for him, right? She's having visions. There's things about Teen that she's very familiar to her, that her motherly instinct is like, oh my god, don't do that. Is he okay? What's going on here? Clearly she didn't give up this child just because she wanted to be more powerful. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's that black and white. And so I like that they keep asking these questions. So, like, oh shoot, okay, how did we get there? Like you said, her mother probably tried to sacrifice her. That's a method to the madness. Of course she'd be a ghost if Agatha retaliated or whatever happened. And now she's like, you killed a whole couple of people. She's like, yeah, they tried to kill me too. You know what I'm saying? There's always an answer to everything. And so I like how they're using, I think, the questions to propel the show into, okay, what is this thing? What is this nuance that's getting us to the next section? And I think, again, Agatha, her mother, Agatha, her son, this motherhood thing is just a looming question on the show, and it's going to get us to the rest of the episodes, because we all still have questions about what's happening. Now, we got answers with Alice. Maybe we'll get answers with the witches that we have left as well. But I think Agatha is the biggest question of them all.
No doubt. Well, speaking of the witches we have left, Alice bites the dust, and it happens in the moment where Agatha's mother, Evanora, who appears as a ghost, I mean, she tries to possess her daughter and essentially suck the life out of her, and it kind of reinforces like, damn, maybe her mom isn't the greatest. Like maybe Agatha does have a lot of reasons for why she is the way she is, and Alice tries to step in, use her power to make things
Hmm.
right, but then we see that it's not probably the best idea because Alice ultimately gets the life sucked out of her completely. And it's weird because at the end of it, we don't really have much time to mourn at all because the episode is just moving at such a quick pace. But we also really can't address whether or not like this was accidental. Who's responsible?
Hmm.
Like, is this an
Hmm.
Evanora thing? Is this an Agatha thing? Like, did Agatha do that out of survival because she was like? It's not all that clear by the end
Yeah.
of it. I think even one of the questions like asked like, what happened here? So we've been left in the dark, but it's another life lost on the road
Yeah.
here. And I mean, you look at Alice, it's like there's probably no coming back from that. Like literally, the life is sucked out of her. So I'd be very surprised if they undid that by the end of the show. But
Yeah.
reinforcing the danger of everything that's happening here, but now also again just adding to the confusion of Agatha's character and ultimately her motivation. Like, do we trust her? Is she responsible? Does she have a point? Is she like leading us down our damnation? Is
Hmm.
the end result for everybody ultimately that the witch's road requires the sacrifice of an entire coven in order to achieve the ultimate goal? Like,
Mm.
is that the main motivation? And Agatha's
Mm.
kind of behind this
Hmm.
whole thing.
Hmm.
She's orchestrating the demise of all of these members of this coven. I think all of those are like super valid questions, but yeah, when you saw that, like it was a crazy scene. How did you feel about it, and ultimately what it may mean for Agatha's motivation and how we perceive her as a character moving forward?
Yeah, what a sad way for Alice to go out, especially after she had just got rid of her generational curse. The trial
Mm-hmm.
before, right? The one trial nobody died. She got rid of this demon, this generational curse, and now next episode she's trying to save Agatha, and Agatha comes back and sucks the life out of her. It's man, it's so dark. But again, what we're talking about is the reason I think I like this show as of right now is because we don't know if Agatha in that moment where she was like, I didn't mean to, it felt sincere. But also we seen you do it. So like what is there something in you that we don't know about or what's happening here? And the show was also good at doubling down on how Agatha acts. 1 second, she sucks the life out of Alice. Whoa, why did she do that? Everyone's mad at her. She says, I didn't mean to. She seems really sad about it. The next second, she's talking to Teen something crazy. You know what I'm saying? Like, whoa, what is going on here? And so I don't. It's really hard for me to tell what they're doing with her, but it's also interesting to see how after leaving the other witches just kind of look at her and go, "Wow, Agatha, really?" Like they can't even you can't really fight her. You know what I mean? You can't fight her. You can't. What can you do as the other witches in that moment for anything? And I think it's been hard to tell what's going on in Agatha, man. And so yeah, they're doing a good job at it. I don't know what's happening. I will say one other thing that is interesting is Rio felt like she knew about the relationship between Agatha and her mother because she was like, she's not going to you. You know what I'm saying? She was like, you were just holding a knife to Agatha. What do you mean you won't let me do whatever to her? She was like, you can't have her. That's a thing for me to do. So I think Rio kind of knew some of the history that was also there. So yeah, man, I don't know, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I do love that the kind of that element just in terms of her. I guess ultimately just like her trust and our reliability in her as a character is just constantly in a state of we just don't really know. And oftentimes she presents a very contradictory view of who she is. She says one thing, but the actions read otherwise, and we know
Hmm.
the history of her, and there's all this chatter and conversation about her, from the other characters. Like there's always just a question at the end of the day, and I think that just creates like really compelling stuff because any perception that's brought to the table, it's definitely reasonable enough to question it and say like, oh, I don't know if we should read that for what they showed us as what it is. Like we have to second guess everything, and I think that that's ultimately like a healthy thing
Mm-hmm.
for where they are with this show. But the last moments here are pretty impactful, pretty important. After it's all said and done, and after Alice dies, Teen, he's very angry by it all. But Jen and Lilia, they're like, we're still following Agatha. We have the same goals in mind. Like we're gonna proceed forward. And Agatha does have like a very vicious moment with Teen. Gets in his face, mocks him, and basically says, "Yeah, you're just like your mother." Says it very, very sinister like, and it's like, "Oh, that's loaded. You must be
Mm-hmm.
talking about Wanda there." And then just a few short moments later, when we see Teen get even more angered, he basically takes over the minds of Lilia and Jen, and basically entraps Agatha into a mud trap. And as they start to sink into the ground, we see this headwear, this crown appear that is very similar to what Wanda wore as the Scarlet Witch, ultimately confirming that this is one of her kids. Not only that, I think it's probably likely that it's Billy of the two
Mm-hmm.
kids, because he did replicate, or he showcased that his powers replicated a lot of what Wanda could achieve, from sort of a witch like standpoint, and these sort of mind control abilities there. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it could be considered unsurprising, but that doesn't make it any less cool or epic.
Yeah.
I think it
Mm-hmm.
works, even though we probably knew that this was the case. Knowing now that one of the kids has aged up, we see him, in the teenage years, and it sort of answers, or at least starts to answer, the questions of like, well, where are they? We haven't seen them in a number of
Mm-hmm.
years. The last time we really saw them was Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Mm-hmm.
But now coming back in this big way, and ultimately, how did this all happen? How did he get here? Was it
Right.
ultimately Agatha that placed the sigil on him? Probably so. I think that calls back to what Rio had told Agatha at the end of episode 4. Like, that's not your son. Why did she kidnap him, I suppose, or maybe put
Mm-hmm.
him under some sort of like, not mind control, but basically do something against his will? There's a lot to be explored and answered there, but it does, again, I think, just make this all even more personal, and ties into everything we saw in WandaVision now carrying over into this show. And we see that this is going to have pretty significant repercussions, I think, for what's to come. So how did you feel about just the revelation of that, and ultimately what it all may mean for the remaining episodes of the show?
Yeah, I thought it was a cool reveal. Actually, like you said, again, I think it was somewhat obvious. A lot of us, there's so many theories that everyone was like, oh, this and that, and I think everybody was like, yeah, it's probably him, but let's wait to see what happens. But like you said, it didn't make it any less cool when you seen it, especially the way it was revealed, right? Like you see the crown that looks very reminiscent of Wanda's crown. You see his powers aren't red like Wanda's; they're very much blue. You're like, oh no, that's Wicked. I know exactly who that is. And I think the again, the question of it all is how, what is happening here? And if it's it being Billy Maximoff, which I definitely, it has to be Billy. I don't think it's anybody else. But part of me feels like, how did Billy get here? Is he technically in some other kid's body? That kid was talking about some dying in a car crash, or it's like, whoa, how did that happen? There's definitely some things that need to be answered. Part of me feels like this might be some other kid's body, and Billy might just happen to be inhabiting that body or something like that. I don't know, but it's a lot of things I think to figure out. But I think it's cool. Like you said, it's a lot of implications. I think Wiccan and Speed are really cool characters. Wiccan for sure is a really cool character, and I think him being here is a cool through line through Multiverse of Madness, through WandaVision. That's like, oh yeah, cool. Let's do this thing. So yeah, I'm happy they did it. I'm happy it is Billy. But now it's like, dang, Billy out here killing people. You know what I'm saying? Like, did he just put these witches under the underneath the ground? What is going on? There's only more questions. You like even because if Billy was to be revealed, Teen has been such a good person this whole time. It's like, I'm going to save this person, this person. All of a sudden, you're angry and you're putting people underneath the ground in some quick mud, quick. I don't know, but it's like, whoa. Okay, now we're getting even more interested, or now we're getting even more interesting. So yeah, man, I can't wait to see what the reveals are, what the answers are. But I think him being here is pretty cool. I like the way he was revealed.
Very much like his mother, pretty short tempered there, and willing to just go ahead and completely just attempt to murder somebody at the moment that they feel like that they've been disrespected, double crossed, whatever the
Yeah.
case may be. But yeah, it's a pretty cool reveal. But there are lots of questions, and I think it just once again calls into question like, hey, these two kids that Wanda like imagined or conjured up, they're not so imaginary anymore.
Mm-mm.
They feel pretty real. I think that they continue to like allude to that fact, like, hey, these are real things, you know, even though she somehow was able to create them out of pure magic. That means something, that counts for something. And so I think that they're, you know, they're kind of going back to that idea here. So lots more to be explored here, but we will certainly have to wait and see. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the most two recent episodes of Marvel Studios Agatha All Along. If you've checked out episodes 4 and 5, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think about them.